So imagine for a second that you're tasked with building a house.
Okay, pretty standard project.
Right. And someone hands you this huge, detailed set of blueprints. So you study them, and you suddenly realize these blueprints are for a medieval castle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like they show you exactly where to dig the moat, how to reinforce the heavy timber drawbridge, where to put the arrow slits.
Very helpful for fighting off knights, I guess.
Exactly. The instructions are incredibly detailed, super rigid, and just completely useless for the quarter-acre plot of land you actually own in the modern world.
Right, because you don't need a moat.
No.
Yeah.
You need Wi-Fi, you need solar panels, maybe a heat pump.
And the frustration in that scenario, I mean, that captures the exact structural mismatch we are experiencing right now and how we prepare the next generation.
It really does.
We are essentially handing young people these incredibly detailed, high-stakes instructions for a civilizational geometry that simply doesn't exist anymore.
And that structural mismatch, that's the driving force behind today's deep dive. We're looking at Chapter 2 of a book called From Pyramids to Diamonds.
Specifically the chapter titled The Need for Youth Adaptive Capacity.
Right. And the core argument we are exploring here is that we are living in a world that is decentralizing and mutating at breakneck speed.
Oh, absolutely. Unprecedented speed.
Yet our educational models are just stubbornly clinging to this industrial age blueprint. We're basically trying to install a 1990s operating system onto hardware that is currently trying to process AI, climate shifts, and massive economic fragmentation.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you have kids, if you work with kids, or if you honestly just care about the future of our society, this completely shifts everything we thought we knew about education.
It really does. And to understand how we need to change youth development, we first have to understand the civilizational crisis they're inheriting, which the text calls the pyramids.
The pyramids, right.
Yeah, these are the old operating systems. Centralized hierarchical institutions built almost entirely around command and control.
So like the traditional corporate ladder.
Exactly. Or the bureaucratic state, or honestly, even the traditional classroom. Pyramids were designed for a very specific environment, an environment of stability and predictability.
Because they need time, right?
Yes. They require the world to move slowly so that information can travel all the way up to the top of the pyramid, a decision can be made by leadership, and then orders can slowly flow back down.
Which works great if the environment outside the pyramid never changes.
But it is changing. The text outlines an environment that is currently defined by accelerating technological change, institutional uncertainty, and just deep social fragmentation.
Right. So by the time the information reaches the top of the pyramid today, the problem at the bottom has already mutated into something entirely different.
Which means the traditional definition of what it means to be an educated person has to change.
Because the old model is all about static knowledge.
Right. Downloading facts and procedures to prepare a student for a very specific, unchanging employment track.
Like memorizing the blueprint for the castle.
Exactly. But the text argues that static knowledge is rapidly becoming a liability out there. What we actually need is adaptive capacity.
And the framework is very strict about how it defines that, right?
Yes. It defines adaptive capacity strictly as preparedness and capability. Not prediction and not control.
Okay, I want to pause on that definition for a second because my instinct, and I think a lot of people's instinct, is to use the word resilience.
Oh, sure. You hear that everywhere.
We hear it constantly in education and psychology, like we need to build resilient kids. But you're saying this text argues adaptive capacity is fundamentally different from resilience.
It is, because resilience implies bouncing back to a previous state.
Okay.
Like you experience a shock, a hurricane, a market crash, a pandemic. You weather the storm, and then you try to rebuild the house exactly as it was before. You return to the baseline.
Right, you recover.
But the text makes this really crucial observation, which is that there is no baseline to return to anymore.
Wow, that's heavy.
It is. Adaptive capacity is about participating constructively in shaping new realities. It's preparing for what the text specifically calls emergence.
Emergence. So it's not going backward, it's moving forward into the unknown.
Exactly. Yeah.
That shifts the goalpost entirely. I mean, traditional education is essentially an algorithm designed to run on a single, stable operating system.
Right.
And if the operating system changes, the algorithm just crashes.
Mm-hmm.
So adaptive capacity sounds more like writing open source code that constantly rewrites itself based on user feedback and, changing environments.
That's a really good analogy. And let's actually look at the anatomy of that open source code, because the framework breaks this down into 4 distinct interconnected traits.
The 4 A's.
Yes, the 4 A's. The baseline trait is adaptability. This is just the raw capacity to respond constructively to disruption.
Okay.
So when the initial plan inevitably falls apart, you don't freeze and you don't throw a tantrum, you just pivot.
But you can't just pivot blindly, right? I mean, if you are just reacting constantly without context, you're just flailing around.
Right.
You might pivot right off a cliff.
Which is exactly why we have the second trait, which is awareness.
Awareness.
The text defines awareness as the ability to perceive relationships, consequences, and systemic conditions more clearly.
Seeing the big picture.
Exactly. And this is perhaps where traditional education does the most damage, honestly.
Really? How so?
Well, traditional schooling often suppresses awareness by siloing everything. You do math at 9 a.m., history at 10 a.m., science at 11 a.m.
As if those subjects just don't interact in the real world.
Exactly. Awareness is removing those blinders. It's teaching a young person to look at the entire room, not just the textbook on their desk, so they actually understand how their actions ripple out into the broader environment.
Okay, so I'm trying to visualize this on a timeline. Adaptability is how you handle the present moment, the disruption. Awareness is how you understand the surrounding space. But there is also the future. We can't just be constantly reacting to what's happening right now, even if we do see the big picture.
No, we can't. And the framework addresses the future through the third trait, anticipation.
Anticipation, okay.
This involves engaging emerging possibilities before they fully materialize. But the crucial distinction the text makes here is that anticipation is not prediction.
Wait, what's the difference?
So prediction is trying to guess the one single outcome that will happen and then betting all your resources on it.
Which creates massive anxiety for young people, I'd imagine.
Huge anxiety, because what if you guess wrong? Anticipation, on the other hand, is taking a wide stance. It's looking at multiple possible futures and preparing capabilities that will be useful regardless of which specific future actually arrives.
Okay, so if prediction is trying to guess the exact weather for next Tuesday, anticipation is just making sure you know how to build a shelter, regardless of whether it rains or snows.
Precisely. And that leads directly to the fourth and honestly the most complex A in the framework. The text pairs accountability with abundance.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because I definitely stumbled over this part of the reading. Accountability, abundance.
Yeah.
I mean, accountability makes total sense, taking ownership of your actions and your awareness, but pairing it with abundance feels like a huge leap to me.
How so?
Well, those seem like totally different concepts. How does taking responsibility somehow magically generate abundance for a young person?
What's fascinating here is that the framework radically redefines abundance. We usually think of it as a stockpile of resources, right? Like financial wealth or having a lot of material goods.
Yeah. Stuff.
Right, stuff. But in this text, abundance is a state of capability and community strength. To understand it, think about the opposite. The scarcity mindset of victimhood.
Okay.
When a young person looks at a failing system and says, the adults at the top of the pyramid need to fix this, they are operating from a deficit. They have basically outsourced their agency.
They become passive recipients, just waiting for a savior who probably isn't coming.
Exactly. But when a young person takes accountability for their awareness, when they say, I see the systemic problem, and I am responsible for my part in addressing it, they shift from passive consumer to active generator.
Oh, I see.
And that shift creates an immediate abundance, an abundance of problem-solving capability, an abundance of social trust, and an abundance of resilience within their own community. Accountability is the actual engine that manufactures capability.
Wow. Okay, so I'm looking at these 4 traits: adaptability, awareness, anticipation, accountability, and I understand the theory. It paints a picture of a highly capable, dynamic individual.
It really does.
But the thing is, you can't just mandate these traits. You can't just stand in front of a classroom of 14-year-olds and say, okay, everyone, be more aware and anticipate the future.
Right. That never works.
So what is the actual machinery here? How do you wire a young person's brain to do this automatically? They don't just appear by magic.
No, they don't. And this is where the text moves from philosophy to the actual mechanism. These traits require what the book calls a developmental infrastructure.
Developmental infrastructure.
Right. Just like a city needs physical infrastructure to move water and electricity, a society needs developmental infrastructure to build character and capacity in its youth.
Okay.
And the framework introduces a specific mechanism for this: the Diamond Process Cycle.
The Diamond Process Cycle. The text outlines this as an 8-stage loop.
Yes. Task, plan, develop, implement, assess, reflect, lessons, and finally, character.
That's a lot of stages.
It is, but it acts as an adaptive engine. Every single time a young person goes through the cycle, they are strengthening those 4 A's.
You know, this really reminds me of muscle memory in sports or even learning to play an instrument.
Oh, how so?
Well, you don't just read a book about riding a bike and suddenly possess the character of a cyclist.
No, definitely not.
You have to define the task of riding, plan your route, develop your balance, implement it by actually pedaling, fall off and skin your knee, assess why you fell, reflect on the physics of leaning too far left, extract the lesson to center your weight, and then try again.
That is a perfect analogy. The physical muscle memory analogy maps perfectly onto how the Diamond Process builds ethical and civic character.
So it's about doing it in the real world.
Exactly. To really understand the mechanics, let's actually run a hypothetical young person through this 8-stage infrastructure. Imagine a teenager who decides they want to turn a vacant, trash-filled city lot into a community garden.
Okay, love it. So the first stage is the task. The objective is clearly defined. Revitalize the vacant lot to produce food for the neighborhood.
Perfect. The next stage is plan. The teenager has to sit down and figure out the logistics. They need to secure permission from the city council, source soil, get seeds, and organize a weekend volunteer crew.
Which immediately forces them out of a static textbook and into the messy real world.
Right.
Which leads right into the third stage. Develop.
Yes. Develop is where the teenager realizes they lack certain skills required by their own plan.
Like what?
Well, they've never spoken at a city council meeting, or they have no idea how to create a budget for buying topsoil. So they have to develop those specific competencies. They research public speaking, they ask a math teacher for help with a spreadsheet.
They're building capability on demand.
Precisely. Then comes the crucible. Stage 4, implement. The day of the community garden build arrives. And this is where the real world usually provides friction.
Always.
Let's say the volunteers show up, but the truck delivering the topsoil never arrives.
Oh, no. So the implementation provides raw, unfiltered data.
Yeah.
The plan met reality, and reality just didn't cooperate.
It happens all the time. And this forces the teenager into stage 5, assess. This is a brutal but necessary look at the outcome. Did we accomplish the task?
The honest answer is no. We have a lot of eager volunteers standing around an empty dirt lot.
Right. And this is a critical divergence from the pyramid model of education.
Oh, definitely. Because in a traditional system, assessment usually just means taking a standardized test and receiving a grade.
Exactly. You get a C on the history exam. Maybe you feel bad about it for a minute, but the system just moves you along to the next chapter anyway. The feedback loop is completely dead.
The Diamond Cycle refuses to let the loop die.
Exactly. Assessment must be followed by stage 6, reflect. The teenager has to ask why the implementation failed. Why didn't the soil arrive?
So they have to dig into the failure.
Yes. Upon reflection, they realize they just ordered the soil online and assumed the vendor operated on the teenager's urgent weekend timeline. They never actually called to confirm a Saturday morning delivery window.
Oh, so they lacked systemic awareness. They treated the vendor like a static variable in a math problem, not, a dynamic human business.
Which brings them to stage 7, lessons. The reflection is distilled into an actual change in behavior. The teenager extracts a core lesson. Assumptions in logistics lead to failure. Always build in redundancies and verify human dependencies.
That's a powerful lesson.
Yeah.
And when you stack those lessons up over time, over multiple projects, you reach the final stage, character.
Right. The text is making a really profound causal argument here. Character is not an innate trait you were just born with.
Right.
Nor is it something you can learn through a lecture on morality. Character is the operational output of running through this 8-stage cycle repeatedly.
So the next time this teenager tries to organize anything, a protest, a startup, a community event, they will inherently verify logistics.
Exactly. They will anticipate friction. Their brain has been physically wired for adaptive capacity.
So this 8-stage process creates a continuous feedback loop. Feedback creates learning. Learning builds adaptation. And that adaptation ultimately strengthens the whole community.
Yes.
You are essentially taking the trial and error process of human evolution and applying it intentionally to youth development.
And that intentionality changes who these young people become when they finally step out into this chaotic, decentralized world.
It has to.
The text argues that the ultimate societal outcome of building this developmental infrastructure is a fundamental shift in the role of youth in civilization.
Because they can no longer just be cogs in a machine. They can't just be passive recipients anymore.
Exactly. In the old pyramid structure, youth were basically standing in a long line waiting 30 years for the adults at the top to retire so they could inherit the levers of control.
Right.
But because those hierarchical pyramids are fracturing across economics, politics, and technology, there is no stable pyramid left to inherit.
The text actually coins a very specific term for this new role. It calls them citizens of emergence.
Yes. A citizen of emergence is someone equipped to be an active participant in decentralized governance, environmental stewardship, and social innovation.
Because they possess the 4As.
Right, because they have been forged in the diamond process cycle. They don't freeze when the institutional blueprint fails. They see the interconnectedness of systems, they anticipate multiple futures, and they take accountability for their immediate environment.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure, go for it.
Because I can totally imagine a cynic reading this chapter and thinking, wow, this is incredibly convenient for the adults.
I see where you're going.
Right. Like, the current generations broke the institutions, polluted the environment, and fragmented the economy. Are we just rebranding our massive civilizational failure as emergence and outsourcing the cleanup to teenagers?
Right.
Like, is adaptive capacity just a polite academic term for passing the buck? Are we just washing our hands of it?
It's a fair question, but the framework doesn't view this as a moral excuse. It views it as a structural reality.
Okay.
The text isn't advocating for abandoning youth to fix the world alone while the adults go take a vacation. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's pointing out that the shift from centralized hierarchies to decentralized networks is happening globally, driven by forces far larger than any single generation's mistakes.
Right.
So things like the internet, artificial intelligence, global supply chain fragility, these things destroyed the pyramid structure regardless of who was in charge. Exactly. The old centralized systems simply lacked the speed, the bandwidth, and the feedback loops to manage modern complexity. The pyramid is falling. Period.
So investing in this developmental infrastructure is really the only logical response.
It is. Because if we hand today's youth the medieval blueprint for the pyramid, we guarantee they will be crushed by the collapsing stone.
Right.
If we build their adaptive capacity, we give them the tools to actually navigate the rubble and design an architecture that actually fits the new geometry of the world.
They become the ones who know how to survive and build in a decentralized network.
They stop waiting for the future to happen to them, and they begin actively shaping it as it unfolds.
Wow. Okay, to bring this all together for you, the listener, the core shift in Chapter 2 of From Pyramids to Diamonds is just a complete reimagining of what preparation looks like. In a hyper-complex, decentralized world, holding a static blueprint is dangerous. We have to replace static knowledge with adaptive capacity, adaptability to pivot, awareness to see the system, anticipation to prepare for multiple futures, and accountability to generate an abundance of capability.
Yep.
And that isn't achieved through just wishful thinking. It is engineered through the relentless feedback loop of the diamond process cycle. You define the task, you implement, you fail, you assess, you reflect, and you build character through action.
It transitions young people from waiting in line for a broken system to becoming active citizens of emergence.
Exactly. And I wanted to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that pushes beyond the text and into your daily life. Let's assume we do the hard work.
Okay.
We build this developmental infrastructure, and we successfully raise a generation of true citizens of emergence young people who are highly adaptive, who question systemic flaws, who are wired for decentralized action and demand honest, brutal feedback.
That would be amazing.
But what happens when those young people collide with the adults who are still desperately trying to operate the old pyramid?
Oh, wow. That's a clash.
Right. Are we, as current leaders, managers, and educators, genuinely prepared to step aside and let an adaptive generation lead? Or will we view their systemic awareness and their demand for accountability as a threat to our traditional top-down control?
That is the big question.
Think about how your own workplace, your own local government, or even your child's school would handle a true citizen of emergence tomorrow morning. Would your organization embrace their open source operating system, or would you try to force them to read your outdated blueprint?
Very powerful thought.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.